Today, we saw something of an apology from the judge overseeing the trial for Paul Manafort. That's the president's former campaign chairman facing bank and tax fraud charges. Judge T.J. Ellis admitted he was probably wrong in scolding the prosecution. I'm sorry, T.S. Ellis. And it's not the first time that this judge has come down hard on attorneys working for Robert Mueller. But the bigger question, of course, could the judge's style sway the jury away from the prosecution, away from a conviction? CNN's Kara Scannell has been inside the courtroom watching all of this unfolding. And Kara, some of these exchanges have been quite testy, as I understand it.
Jake, that's right. Yesterday, the judge admonished the prosecutors for reminding the judge of his own ruling from the day before. So this morning, he came into court, and after the prosecutors asked him to address this to the jury to kind of remove any sort of stain that might exist, the judge called the jury in, and here's what he said. We have a couple words we can put up. He said, "Put aside any criticism. I was probably wrong in that. This robe doesn't make me anything other than human." So the judge, this is now the 10th day of the trial, and the judge, even from the outset, has been tough on the prosecutors. When they began bringing in their case, they had several vendors that were the people who sold Paul Manafort his Mercedes-Benz, his ostrich jacket, and the judge criticized the prosecutors then when they wanted to show pictures of this evidence. At the time, here's what the judge said. The judge said, "Look at me when you're, Mr. Manafort is not on trial for having a lavish lifestyle." Now, all the criticism of the prosecutors, this is something that does happen in courts. Judge Ellis is one of these judges that really likes to command his courtroom and move it along. But there was even an exchange that took place in a sidebar that was out of the place of the jury, where he was giving the prosecutors, again, another hard time. And this was where they were just having a discussion. The judge said to one of the prosecutors, "Look at me when you're talking to me." And the prosecutor responded, "These are not tears in my eyes, Judge." And the judge said, "Well, they're watery." So the judge has really been leaning on the prosecutors in this case. The defense hasn't yet began their case in chief, so we'll wait to see if the judge does take a hard line on them. But it doesn't necessarily mean that he's putting a thumb on the scale. Judges often like to command their courtroom, and this is the case with a lot of documentary evidence. It looks like he's trying to move it along, especially when he sees some evidence that he might view as being repetitive, Jake.
All right, thank you so much. Kim Whaley joins me now. She was an assistant U.S. attorney. And the concern here is obviously that the judge, in reprimanding the prosecution or the defense, he's reprimanding them as well, might influence the jurors and how they think about this.
Sure. I clerked for a somewhat curmudgeonly judge like this, and he did the same thing. I do think that the jury can see through and focus on the facts and the law. And there's an argument to be made for this kind of tight courtroom actually producing a better result and a better outcome for both sides. It's harder to get away with stuff. And in addition, I think this judge is mindful of a possible appeal. If there is a conviction, he wants to make sure it doesn't look like the prosecution had any favors along the way by him that could be reversed on appeal.
But couldn't it, that's only if there's a conviction, of course, but if there is not a conviction, the government can't appeal it, that's it, so it doesn't matter. So is it always better to lean on the prosecution to be tougher with them than with the defense?
Well, judges handle it different ways. I think, some of us are old enough to remember the O.J. trial where things were just kind of out of control, and that is actually not a good outcome. But that being said, judges command a tremendous amount of authority, and there might be people on the jury who say, listen, this judge doesn't like this prosecutor, maybe I shouldn't trust the prosecutor. So that is something, I think, to be mindful of. It's certainly not something I think prosecutors are happy about. But is it reversible error? Probably not.
How common are these kinds of reprimands, and how unusual is an apology from a judge?
Now, again, the reprimands really depend on the reputation of the judge and how he or she runs a courtroom. Some judges are extremely cordial and gentle and kind and don't get into that at all. Now, I'm sorry, what was your second question?
The second question is how unusual is an apology? Because it strikes me that that's not something that a guy like this does easily.
Yeah, that's somewhat unusual. Normally if something like that happens, there could be a request in the jury instructions before the jury goes back to deliberate to say, and maybe this will be included, listen, jury, what comes out of from the court from behind the bench is not evidence. But frankly, I think it was refreshing to see someone in that kind of position of power in this polarized society admit that he made a mistake and that he's only human. And I think we should all kind of take a note from that page.
It's true. We don't see a lot of that in today's society. Kim Whaley, thanks so much. Appreciate it.